All right, let's turn to this now. President Cyril Ramaphosa has given former President Jacob Zuma until Monday to withdraw the private prosecution against him or face consequences. This follows after the Jacob Zuma Foundation announced on Thursday that the former president will privately prosecute Ramaphosa, accusing him of being an alleged accessory in the leaking of a confidential medical document after Zuma to the media. Let's unpack this with political analysts now. Asanda, Ngoasheng, as well as Sanusha, Naidu joining us. Good evening, and thank you very much, ladies, for being with us tonight here on In Focus. Asanda, let's begin with you. Thursday, right? We get this groundbreaking news, so to speak, late into the evening, just before the start of the conference, that there's private prosecution that's been launched by former President Jacob Zuma. Of course, the president responds saying this is an abuse of the legal process. He goes on to conference, disrupted as he's about to present his political report by Jacob Zuma walking in and, of course, creating some disruptions there. Today, we are getting this letter now, going to the president saying withdraw this invalid summons by Monday, or, of course, face the consequences that come thereafter. In a political space where there's contestation currently going on, how do you read this?
I think that, it's classic Jacob Zuma strategies and stunts to obfuscate, spread lies. That's what he does. I mean, if you look at the genesis of the letter of prosecution itself, the certificate, Karen Warren made it very clear that this was a certificate that was produced for her case after she had said that there was no case because the certificate hadn't been issued. And then the new certificate suddenly emerges and it gives Jacob Zuma the right to basically prosecute anyone in terms of its writing. But I mean, if you think about it, just on a common sense basis, there's no way that any court or any kind of prosecuting authority would give anybody the ability to just have that kind of blanket prosecution. So it's a very obvious case of abuse of the law, but it doesn't matter to somebody like Jacob Zuma because it's all about confusing the delegates who are going to be in the room, who are going to be very vulnerable and susceptible to any and all allegations and kind of engagements that are happening at this very critical moment. You would have seen also that there was a story on BBC talking about how there was a leak of the logo of something called Renew SA. And again, there's allegations that Cyril Ramaphosa just wants to ride through the conference and then he'll resign in January. This is all about, making sure that Gwede Mantashe and others have positions. He's no longer interested in being the president. These are the kind of things that are meant to ensure that as delegates go and vote, they cast some doubt. If they were sure that they're going to vote for Cyril Ramaphosa, it's supposed to cast some doubt about whether you can trust that he's going to come back. There's also allegations around Cyril Ramaphosa, which are always there, but are almost kind of at a deafening level of, there's even posters and memes going around saying the real top 6 in South Africa are the top 6 richest South Africans who also happen to be white and who also happen to be male. And so it's really just a fear-mongering propaganda to ensure that at every single point, just when Cyril Ramaphosa thinks that he's got this and thinks that, he has enough support, that doubts, the seeds of doubt are planted. We've also seen allegations that, Cyril Ramaphosa's people are giving people 20,000 Rand cash offers. Again, yet another allegation that can't be substantiated, that isn't coming with any kind of proof, but is just being thrown so that as the delegates are sitting wanting to cast their vote, they have all of these things running through their heads. And it's going to be interesting to see whether the delegates are going to vote based on the mandate that would have been given from their branches when they left, or they're going to vote based on, what has happened in sort of the last kind of 48 hours or so.
Yeah. Sanusha, is President Cyril Ramaphosa playing into this game, into this tactic by this particular response? Because the president's lawyers are saying, one, this kind of act actually must be ignored, but two, they doubt that actually even the delivery and the content of the document are actually valid. In fact, they think it amounts to a violation of the integrity of constitutional institutions. would Cyril Ramaphosa have been better off just ignoring this and continuing with conference and not responding to it? Does he feed into it as he responds to it?
Good evening, Thabo. Good evening, Asanda, and good evening to the viewers. I mean, I have to agree with Asanda. I think it's about what the impact of the accusation is. It's about how it plays into the kind of volatility of this conference. What is fact? What is fiction? What is verified? What is non-verified? And I think the tactic and the strategic play is really not necessarily about understanding the legal ambit of what a private prosecution means and the kind of implication it has. Now, how President Ramaphosa responds to it, I think he is responding to it in terms of the kind of legal ambit in a response that you have to give. The challenge is that how the ordinary delegates at the conference will interpret it is a different matter. Would they see this? I mean, even in the case of understanding the kind of tweets that were coming out with regard to the fact that, you know, there were these blanket claims on Twitter by certain individuals claiming that the president has been criminally charged without necessarily disaggregating what the legal implication is. And so the optics and the kind of impact that this will have is that delegates who are essentially caught up in the maelstrom and the hailstorm of all of this are just going to say, well, there's something sinister here. The president has to be accounted for, and there's something criminal that he has done. Yeah. So I think the challenge right now is you've got a serious set of crises that has taken our legal fraternity and our legal establishment, and I don't think there's any kind of understanding or even intent to understand that we're going to manipulate this in the best way possible, because the strategy is that we go out in all the offense that we could. So it's unfortunate that people will just read what is the soundbite, what's the headline, but without necessarily understanding what this means. So I think in the case of whether President Ramaphosa has to respond or should not respond, he's doing it in the context of trying to trying to respond to it in the legal ambit. Yeah. And of course, Asanda and I and others are trying to understand what is the criminal charge. Because remember, this is a private prosecution for the former president's own kind of offense and dispute around Advocate Billy Downer. Yeah. And its question is, whether or not he's asking the president now to take a side here. That's also a critical issue in terms of legal interference.
That's exactly what I'm asking you, Sanusha. Is he managing the optics well? Yes, on the legal frame of things, he probably should be responding through the lawyers in such a manner. This is a President Cyril Ramaphosa who was going into this conference already under a lot of pressure, having to deal with the independent panel report into the Phala Phala matter. And, of course, former President Jacob Zuma adding to this, of course, playing into the step-aside resolution of the ANC. Is he managing those optics well to a point where those delegates who are there would actually understand what the president is trying to do?
Let me be a little bit flippant, Thabo, and raise it and say, imagine if you or I were in that position. How do we manage optics once the die is cast? Especially given the volatility going into this conference. I'm not saying that the president is obliged to take a particular stance, but I'm saying that he's utilizing what he sees as the legal response. The problem with this whole kind of dynamic that we are having is that we've come into this conference with the way in which you are going to push forward on the optics. So already, when you watched the former president make his entrance into that auditorium, into the hall yesterday, into the open plenary, and the way that played out. When you're looking at the delegates now coming out of the closed plenary with the adoption of the organizational report, etc., the focus of the symbols, the optics, the kind of singing and dancing. I mean, I know that in terms of the rules, etc. They were trying to contain that in order to try and mitigate these kinds of issues. Unfortunately, you can't do that in this kind of atmosphere, because it's already been set in precedence in previous elective conferences, and it's set in the branch structures, in the BGMs, in how these things have played out even before this elective conference began several hours late yesterday.
Yep.
And I think the problem here is whatever the president is going to put out, he's always going to have to firefight in different ways.
Ladies, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. Political analysts Asanda, Ngoasheng, and Sanusha, Naidu.